What makes people say yes? It's not just to a sale, but to your idea, your leadership, or the next step you want them to take. It's rarely pressure. It's more the understanding how people actually make decisions. Today, we're talking about the psychology behind trust, influence, and ethical persuasion, plus practical strategies that you can use right away in sales, marketing, leadership, and client conversations. So, if you want a better communications that leads to better results, stay with us. Hey, entrepreneurs, are you working too hard for too little profit? Well, welcome to Profit with a Plan podcast, where we help business owners scale smarter, increase profitability, and build a company that's worth more, whether you plan to keep it or sell it. I'm Marcia Riner, business growth strategist and the profit booster behind Infinite Profit. Each week, I bring practical strategies, expert insights, and real-world steps to help you grow revenue, improve margins, and build a stronger business. This episode is brought to you by Infinite Profit, where strategy turns into profitable growth. But before we jump in, I have something special for you. If your revenue is plateaued or your marketing is just not producing the return it should, go get your free Profit Booster Growth Map. In just a few minutes, it'll help you identify where to bring in more qualified clients and where profit leaks may be costing you money. Go get yours after the show at profitbooster.biz. Now let's get on to today's conversation. Patrick van der Burght is a globally recognized expert, if I can get my mouth to work, in ethical persuasion and influence. He is a business partner of Dr. Robert Cialdini, author of the legendary book Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. And Patrick is also the founding member of the Cialdini Institute and one of the only few select licensed trainers worldwide. For more than 2 decades, he has helped professionals, leaders, and sales teams understand how people make decisions, build trust faster, and communicate in a way that lead to stronger relationships and better results. He is also the co-author of How to Hear Yes More Often and the host of his own podcast, Ethical Persuasions Unlocked. Patrick, welcome to Profit with a Plan podcast. I need to fine tune my mouth here today. It's just stumbling left and right. So this will be fun.
Thank you for inviting me, Marcia. I remember when I discovered Dr. Cialdini's work in the science of persuasion, and it was really exciting. As in, I was like, "Are you serious? Is this how it works? And you don't have to lie and cheat," which exactly fitted into my sort of ethics and how I would like to deal with people. And I see that same realization when I do a keynote or a workshop. People's eyes just get a little bigger as the time progresses. And so I'm hoping that we're getting a similar sort of reaction in your audience. And so thank you for putting me in front of them.
I love it. So when did you find Dr. Cialdini's work?
Oh, goodness. I was a sales rep in selling scuba diving equipment. And it was cassette tapes in the car back then, right? And my boss had hired a business consultant who was actually, I think, working with J. Abraham at the time or beforehand, which we all know. And he was local to Melbourne, which is where I'm in Australia. And he said, "Oh, if you ever have any, if you ever have any questions or things about how to implement the strategies that we're sharing with your team and the sales reps of your boss's company, then come visit us in Vermont." And that was close to me. And I don't know if you've ever been on holiday and you bumped into a Dutch person, and you might say, "Listen, if you're ever in America, need a place to stay, come visit." Don't do that with Dutch people. They'll
Yes.
turn up, right? And
So you turned up on his doorstep.
yeah, of course, as at his office. But he really liked how, I mean, you know this, right? You can give advice to people, and then they might try it once, and then it doesn't work straight away, and they discount it as in, "Oh, this stuff doesn't work." And I'm not like that. I go, "Why didn't I get the results that clearly this is able to do?" So I'd go back to him, and his name was John McDonald's, He really liked this. And so we had these little chats, but he was lending me these educational series, cassette tapes, right? And I mean, they're cheap now, but they used to be expensive. I remember paying $1,200 for a set of Brian Tracy CDs. And so he was lending me this stuff. And there was this one series called Mind Capture. I think it was just before the turn of the century or something. And Dr. Cialdini was on there with 2 cassette tapes. And that's
When you
blew
fell in
me
love.
away. Blew me away.
Wow. Wow. It's so funny how time was way back before the internet, right? And cassette tapes and, those kind of things. But knowledge and skill set, that's where we professionals can really fine tune and sharpen our sword, right? In so many ways. And as a continuous learner, I love that space because there's always so many things, even I've got a mentor that goes back to, 1926 when he pulls some of his stuff. And I'm like, it still applies, right? It still works. And that's
And
why I love the fact that your origin story was very similar to mine. Like I wouldn't go knock on their door, but I just love gathering information.
it's interesting you mentioned, how times have changed, right? When it comes to what we're discussing here today and what your audience is getting from us, this was topical when Dr. Cialdini wrote his book in 1984, right? But our world is changing. Our world is speeding up. We are getting more and more information thrown at us. And to quote Dr. Cialdini, we live in the most information overloaded, stimulus saturated environment that has ever existed on this planet. And he was saying that in the 90s, and it's just getting more and more true. And as a result, our attention span is getting shorter. We used to have an attention span of 20 minutes in the 80s. Do you know what the attention span of the famous goldfish is supposed to be?
It's somewhere around 2, 3 seconds.
Oh, I'll give him a little bit of credit. 9 seconds for the 9 seconds for the goldfish. Our attention span is now 7 seconds. We've been beaten by the goldfish. And so when it comes to what we're discussing here today, that has become more relevant and more valuable in the world that we're going to, because people are overloaded. And when you come with a message, if you come with the typical message that a business professional or a small business owner is trying to put out there, it's filled with the wrong pieces of information, and we actually cause uncertainty in our audience, and they decide not to decide. They push back from you and your wonderful, genuinely good for them, good value proposal. And so you're losing out on successes, and it doesn't need to be sales related. It could be your team doing as you asked, or negotiating with your local council, or your teenage children trying to get them to clean up their room, right? A lot of non-compliance doesn't need to be non-compliance. They're not no's, they're indecision. So yeah, it's a very exciting topic, and business knows this. I mean, goodness, Dr. Cialdini's book, 1984 it started. Was it this year or last year? Forbes had another article on their website with the timeless reads for business owners. What's at number 1?
Nice.
Influence, the psychology of persuasion.
I love it. All right. So we know that we have to grab attention quickly, right? And I'm a big fan of saying that, and I don't know where I heard this, I didn't come up with it, but I heard it somewhere that, the audience doesn't care about me. They care about themselves and solving their problems. So what can we do in those brief 7 seconds to get them to stop and lean in a little bit?
Okay, well, we have to give them an excuse, a reason to stick around. And it's nice you took this angle, and I love this with interviews, as in, when I'm interviewed, we go into different angles depending on your question.
Rabbit holes.
Yeah, so let's quickly jump to a website, right?
Okay.
The area of a website that you can see without scrolling is called above the fold. This comes from newspaper times, right? When you put the newspaper on the table, and for those who are younger, those were lots and lots of paper with writing on it. And then, you have to turn the page, right? And what you can see before you turn the page, I think it was called before the fold, right? So with a website, we say above the fold. And so it's arrogant to think that everybody who gets on your website will actually start scrolling. You'll be horrified. How many people will take the trouble to go to your domain? They look at the area that they can see without scrolling and go,
And they're
right? And they're gone, right? So you have that moment to share some information that appeals to the primary decision-making part of the brain, which functions as a shortcut. And I'd love to explain that for everyone.
yeah.
For their brain to go, you know what? This is probably a good idea or a good decision for me to start scrolling, right? That's what you try. So if you put your persuasive information below the fold, they may never see it. So when it comes to, all right, we got to be quick, absolutely. When you
I
send somebody a
love it.
message, you're reaching out, when you do lead generation, if you're failing to put that information in that actually matters, you're underperforming your potential by a vast percentage, which is really not funny.
And I think that statement references to everything we're doing. If you're talking to someone and someone says, "What do you do?" If you give your, long-winded version, they've shut down their ears and they're looking for the exit as quickly as possible. But if you hook them with that above the fold kind of statement, it can be used on a telephone call, as an introduction and email format. I mean, exponential places that it can go, obviously. So how do we start to figure that out? I know there's a long process that you go through to really define all this, but I'm kind of coming from different angles to see if we can see how real use this can actually turn into.
Yeah, cool. So normally what I sort of dive into is the science of human decision making. I can try and squeeze that into something small. And if people want to know more, which I would really encourage them to do, is to go to my podcast, Ethical Persuasion Unlocked. I would normally urge people to start with episode 1 because it actually follows a good logical progression. But episode 2 is about the science of human decision making, and then we can go a lot deeper. But if I put it in a nutshell, and I'm leaning on the work of Professor Daniel Kahneman, who died a couple of years ago, unfortunately, but he was a professor in psychology and a behavioral scientist. And he won a Nobel Prize in 2002 in economics, which is a bit odd, right? I mean, normally you win a Nobel Prize.
Psychology and economics?
Yeah, for an extraordinary contribution to that field. So what does a behavioral scientist come up with that has such an impact on economics? Well, his research is largely about decision making. And so he disproved a popular belief that old economics had. Old economics figured that people are logical, rational creatures, and we would therefore use logic and reason to formulate our decisions. And that's wrong. And that's what Daniel Kahneman demonstrates. So when it comes to decision making, your brain, as Daniel Kahneman explains, has 2 parts, system 1 and system 2. System 1 is the intuitive part of the brain, which works really fast. It works automatically. It is outside of our conscious control. And we use it for everyday decisions, but it is error prone, meaning that when we are, let's say you're shopping for something that you don't know anything about. You're looking to buy a monitor for your computer setup or something. And you know nothing about monitor construction or what makes them last long or that sort of stuff. So you could leave the store and you could go and do research and learn about monitor construction and all that sort of stuff. And then 4 months later, you'll be able to come back and make an educated decision about which monitor to buy. But I don't know about you. I don't have the time for that. And so something in the back of our head might bubble up because there's a shortcut that might apply in the situation. The shortcut could be expensive equals good. Right? We've learned from experience that most of the time when you spend more money on something, you get something that's of better quality, better suited to purpose, and going to last you longer.
In theory.
And so
yes.
In that moment, expensive equals good is a shortcut to a quicker decision. And that allows system 1 to make a quick decision. Now, system 2, on the other hand, that's our logical, rational part of the brain. And so that is conscious thinking. It looks at all the information we've got available and it makes a very reliable decision. But Daniel Kahneman calls it the lazy controller. It doesn't actually want to engage. It's quite happy for system one to make the decisions. Now, punchline is that Daniel Kahneman, back in 2002, highlights that 90% of our decisions, that's 90% of our decisions are made by system one, outside of our conscious control, largely based on shortcuts. And now it's said that that's 95%. And the reason that's increasing is because that attention span I mentioned earlier, that's getting shorter. And so here's the big problem. There's a big disconnect between what science knows works and what business does, right? So when we don't know the science and we think, okay, how am I going to convince this person to interact with my lead generating efforts?
Sure.
How am
In
I
7 seconds.
Yeah. How am I going to get this person to be favorable towards my sales pitch? How do I get my team members to follow the safety procedures that they really ought to? When you're sitting there thinking, you're using conscious thought. And so you're using system two. And that has the habit of coming up with the pieces of information that would need system two and the other person to process it. But they don't have the time for it anymore. And that's where they get that uncertainty and you're overloading them and they decide not to decide. So you might do 1,000 proposals, you might get a small percentage of yeses, and most of them you would think, well, there were no's, I didn't get the business, but they didn't need to be no's. A large percentage of those, much larger than you probably imagine, were just indecision. Had you only supplied a piece of information for system one to go, good enough for me, you would have had the business. So that's the
now the
realization.
$1 million question, though. What would be that solution, or what would be that item that they need that they can make that decision 95% of the decision based on non-thought-provoking decision making?
It's basically
right?
what it is, non-thought-provoking. So that's exactly what Dr. Cialdini put in his book, Influence. Those are the 7 universal principles of persuasion. They're basically a way for you to understand what types of information qualify as shortcuts. So shall I dive into those and run through them?
Yeah, that sounds very interesting.
Okay, great. So they're universal principles because they work in all languages, all cultures, and all countries. And that's exceedingly helpful because our cultures are intermixed, but it's also very easy to do business with people in other countries.
Yes.
All right, so 7 principles, all these words you've heard before. Goodness, you might even have read Dr. Cialdini's book, but that doesn't mean that you understand how it works, that you know the activators or the amplifiers. And I mean, I love when people have read Dr. Cialdini's book, but when I look on their website, read their brochures, listen to their team sales pitches.
You're like, obviously.
You're not using it, right? So you need application skills. So bear with me. So we have reciprocity. People have a tendency to want to give back the same type of behavior that first was given to them. And in the context of compliance, we are much more likely to want to cooperate with people that we feel we owe. And so in business, we've taken that as, okay, we got to give people stuff. And that's in essence correct, but a lot of businesses get it wrong. A classic example is the downloadable ebook on your website, right? You might have a nice ebook as a lead generator. I'm not saying it's a bad lead generator, but if you think that it activates reciprocity, you're probably making a great mistake. So if I ask you to put your name and your email address so I can send you the download link, it's not a gift, it's a reward. A reward ends the relationship. A gift starts it, right? So
I like it.
Doesn't have that feeling that the emotional bank account is out of balance, where instead, if I gave you, a PDF checklist with valuable information about where you are and a decision you need to make, and it's just a right click and download, no email required. Now it's a gift. Now it's like a piece of cheese in the supermarket that you think doesn't change your behavior, but the data is very clear. You give things away, people reciprocate and buy more. So reciprocation, we want to think, how can I genuinely help this other person, regardless if they start using me?
Because they gave me something. Hey, quick pause here. If you've ever wondered what your next smartest move should be to grow your business, well, I've built something for you. It's called the Profit Booster Growth Map. It takes only about 2 minutes, it's totally free, and it shows you exactly where you're leaving money on the table and what to fix first. Go grab it for free at profitbooster.biz/growth map. Then come right back to the episode.
Yeah, something helpful. And it doesn't need to be tangible. It can be intangible. It could be your time, your attention, but you do need to verbalize it properly. All right. Liking. We like people that are like us, meaning similarities. We like people that like us. And we like people that like us and say so, which is compliments, right? So I'll weave some tips in here straight away. So there was a study between Northwestern and Stanford, and they looked at negotiators who used email to negotiate difficult business contracts. And these negotiations took a long time, and this represented an enormous amount of money that was being invested. And they figured out that 30% of those negotiations ended up in deadlock, which cost them an enormous amount of money. One of my colleagues advised them to, when they go into a meeting, to first share some personal information in terms of what are your interests, what are your hobbies, what do you like to do, what's the favorite food you eat, that sort of stuff, and get a conversation going with the other party in terms of who they are and try and figure out something. It wasn't about how much information was being shared. What was critical is how many similarities were uncovered. And the punchline of that study was that deadlock negotiations dropped from 30% to 6%.
Wow. So are you suggesting that we come in and say, just here in the States, we often have team alliances, right? So, God forbid, a Raiders fan, right? Because I'm in Las Vegas and they're terrible, but I'm a Raiders fan, right? And so bonding along those lines is really going to give you that much weight when it comes to them making a decision.
Yeah, you want to uncover similarities. So, and to your point, if you uncover that you support this team and now your audience supports that team, now you've not missed the similarity, right? That might not work for you. But what you instead could say, I love football. Right? And then if the other person goes, oh, I love football too, now you're similar.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep, I like it.
Right,
so
cool.
you're saying that are your list of 7 in a hierarchy order, or are they just a listed order? I mean, does one make more weight than the others?
Oh, two very cool questions. They are in a particular order, but that goes a little bit too deep to go into that today. What order they're sort of in is that there's you could say 3 pillars to you negotiating or convincing, persuading someone. You need a relationship with the people. You need a good relationship. Yeah. If you don't like someone, you're going to go out of your way not to deal with them, right? So we need a strong relationship. But you have people that have a good relationship with you, but they're not buying your product because they're still uncertain about what it is you're actually offering, or they're still uncertain that this is applicable to them, that you're offering good value. So uncertainty is now your problem. So we want to reduce uncertainty. And so there's principles in the 7 that are great for building and repairing relationships. There's other principles which are great at reducing uncertainty. But if we've got both those covered, if we've got a good relationship and people are certain about what it is we're offering, when I'm ready, I'm going to get your stuff. But they're still not buying, are they? Right? They're still not buying. So now motivation is lacking. And so there's principles that are powerful, your go-to principles when you want to motivate people. But if you start that when you don't have a relationship or there's still uncertainty, you're not going to have a great result.
You get that uncomfortable push rather than the gentle pull, right? Or the persuasion in that manner, because we've all had that experience of someone coming in going, oh, buy my stuff, but and it's like, wait a minute. Oh,
You're
but
not
I've got
ready.
this, like, you got to buy before midnight, or you've got to, and all these things, but it sounds like it's in the wrong order because A, you haven't built the relationship and you haven't given them the clarity yet to be able to provide them the momentum or the motivation to go through on it.
That's right. And if you have, I mean, honestly, if I can give you the tools to build a relationship quickly, to reduce uncertainty, and to motivate people into action, do you need anything else, or have you got it covered? You got it
Well, I
covered,
think you
right?
also have to have, you have to be talking to the right person who has a need for the product that you happen to be selling or the solution you happen to be selling. So, I mean, market fit has to be there before any of that. You can still,
Absolutely. So you increase your chances, but even if you talk to somebody who's less qualified, we still, in our efforts of communicating, we still want to maximize the chances of getting a result in that situation, whatever that percentage might be. So yeah, you're absolutely right, but it still applies everywhere. And then your other thing is one principle better than the other? Well, that I can now easily explain. It depends on where you are in the relationship. There's no principle that's more powerful than the other ones because it depends on where you are. If you have no
ah,
relationship, well, then the principles for relationship building are your go-tos. But, if you've got that relationship and uncertainty is gone, well, then, for example, scarcity, which we're very familiar with, that's a good motivator at that time. All right. Shall I
wow.
move
Okay,
on?
so that makes total sense because it gives your principles a little bit more of weight in the conversation because we all know reciprocity and liking each other. We all try and bond before the conversation can go. But oftentimes, like you said, it still falls flat because you haven't done the other factors that are involved with making a sales transaction. Now, do these principles and these pillars only apply for, let's call it, high ticket items, or do they apply for maybe not quite impulse, but somewhere in between? Maybe it's a lower priced item or something that doesn't require deep, deep research and commitment to be able to purchase.
I would argue that their effect would be um, equally important or applicable in every situation. And actually, it doesn't apply to per se the purchase, it applies to behavior, right? So purchasing is buying behavior. When I talk to my teenager to clean up their room, there's no transaction, but I still want them to clean up their room, right? If I talk to my partner about the next, holiday you might want to go on, or, if you're talking to, I don't know, team members to stay, if you're a board member and you've made mistakes, or sorry, if you're the CEO and you've made some bad calls in the past, how do you get your board members to stay with you? Right? That's
Mm.
behavior. And so this comes back everywhere. Yeah, if it's about a packet of gum, well, then maybe it's a little less, less impactful. But, if we can still demonstrate that these pieces of information are in the situation, we would improve our success rate.
I love that. So it's not just the sales transaction, it's getting them to buy into your idea, it's getting them to buy into the direction you want to do, and God forbid you should ever want your kid to clean up their room, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's a challenge right there. But I love that kind of persuasion is that you're getting them, you're building a relationship with them on this topic, or even something longer or deeper, like a longer relationship, but you're still niching it down to the action that you want them to follow by taking these steps. So I know that we're only on a half-hour show here, and I know that we can go on for at least an hour and a half, if not 2 hours, on these topics alone. But let's briefly finish those principles that are so important to getting someone to say yes and make a decision, even if it's not to buy your stuff, but to do an action that you want them to do, the next thing that you want them to do. Book a call, maybe.
Exactly. All right. So there's the principle of unity, which was the last principle that was, let's say, discovered. So unity is about a feeling of community. If I have if I feel that I grew up in the same suburb as you, or we went to the same school together, or we support the same team, or we are those types of people that like football, right? Now you're part of a community. And if you bring that to the surface, people are, will treat you far more favorably. You get this favoritism towards each other. So it's very powerful. Then there's the
Got it.
principle of social proof, right?
Okay.
We've all heard of that term.
Yeah. And funny enough, back in the 80s, in the early 80s, I mean, it social wasn't that big. So we're not necessarily talking about having proof on Facebook or LinkedIn, but we're talking about having what?
The social proof means the actions of comparable others. We have a tendency to follow the actions of others, especially when they are numerous and when they are similar to us and when we are uncertain. This is
Mm,
why testimonials and reviews are so powerful. And I think by now, most business owners know that they should not do without that on their website or in their conversations, right? And I applaud you for it. But if you if you think that you shouldn't not use referrals and testimonials, you'll be shocked to hear there's probably another 11 strategies to when it comes to social proof who are equally, if not more powerful, and you're not using any of those. But yes, we follow the actions of others. So testimonials are important. Testimonials with more details are valuable for the reader. So don't be
mm.
shy and ask people, oh, would you please leave a testimonial? And we'd love it if you can put a little bit of details in it about your experience, right? That makes that testimonial more valuable. What's interesting is that it is negative reviews that, of course, draw the eye much quicker, right? We all want to know what's wrong with it. And so what's important there, and yeah, no time today, but is how do you respond to that negative review in a way that you use some of the principles of persuasion to use the drawing power of a negative review to share the positive side of your business. So anyway,
Got
social
it.
proof. I'll move on because I know we're short of time. Authority is that we follow the actions or recommendations of people that have more knowledge and wisdom on a particular topic. Now, that's why it's helpful if you have reports of doctors, professors, research, industry standards, that sort of stuff. That helps. That's great. But you yourself, you are also an authority. You know your business. You know this stuff. But getting yourself seen as an authority, that's not so easy. And what you can do is turn up and go, hi, my name is Patrick. Let me tell you the 35 reasons why you should listen to me today, right? People
Thanks.
think that you're full of yourself. Then to left, consistency is that we want to stay true to past actions and statements that we've made. So that's an important sort of internal pressure that we experience. So we can use that again in an ethical way to motivate people to move forward. And then lastly, scarcity. We value things more that are less available, that are rare, that are scarce, and or are dwindling and available, or that are unique. And so we need to look for genuine scarcity in the situation. If you're a doctor or a therapist and you can only take so many appointments in a week or in a day, that's natural scarcity. You should bring that up and make people aware of it. But we don't want to invent false scarcity because unethical use of persuasion can backfire, and that leaves us with credibility craters.
Oh, I can imagine, right? And it sounds like hearing some of these things, I've experienced others, not me, but others that have used one or two of these, but not all of them. Do we need to have this, Patrick? Do we need to have a full list of these in all of our actions, or can we use one or two?
Most people don't use any,
Well,
or
scarcity is pretty common, but they use it at the wrong time and, throw it out there in the wrong way, right?
yeah.
So that one I would think that they're trying to do. But I mean, do we need to stack all of these?
No, we don't need to stack all of them. In fact, you don't want to use all of them in the same communication because at some point, if you start layering them, like all seven in there, you really start getting the feeling that you're trying to convince me. And then sometimes people can put the brakes on. So it's more important to realize where you are in the situation
Mm,
and then go, okay, I'm early on. I need to build relationship and maybe reduce a bit of uncertainty, but I'm going to leave motivation right alone, right? When it's later down the piece and I've got that relationship, then you want to pick those. So you might use one, two, maybe three of these principles, and yeah, they can have an enormous effect. I can give you a quick example. Bose was launching a new hi-fi system, and they had a poster, an advertisement campaign that their people had designed, and it was not doing very well.
Mm.
Sales were disappointing. And they actually hired Dr. Cialdini to look at the ad. And it was very technical, which is all system two information, logic and reason. But Bose's audience really likes that type of information. The problem was the headline. The headline actually had a principle of persuasion in it, but it was working against Bose. That happens
Mm.
all the time as well. You accidentally use something, but in the wrong direction. You work very effectively against yourself. And so Dr. Cialdini just changed the headline. That was it. And he used a principle to work for Bose. And sales increased by 45%.
Wow. That's insane. How just the little shifts can make such a huge difference. Once you're aware of them and you learn how to use them properly, then it's like now it's not an unfair advantage, but it seems like it is the right advantage that you want to use in many places in your life, whether you're, trying to negotiate with your kids or, bring business in, or you're trying to just be a better person and move people in the right way. I think that, things done with good intentions always turn out better, but, this seems like something that is really valuable in the fact that we need to learn it, right? So
Yep.
I know we're running out of time here, and like I said, we could go on for 2 hours here, Patrick. But where can listeners find this information so they can start to consume it like a Netflix, series, right? They're going to get in and they're just going to keep going with it and then start to practice it and get your help.
Thank you for asking. So, of course, there's lots of materials to find out. First of all, you could buy Dr. Cialdini's book, and the book I wrote with some of my colleagues, How to Hear Yes More Often, is a nice complement to that book because it focuses on the practical application.
Love it.
So that can be helpful. But reading a book takes time, and we tend to forget a lot.
Mm.
So, where can you find out more? Well, you can, of course, visit me on my website. It's ethicalpersuasion.com.au because I'm based in Australia, so it's .com.au. There you can find information about how you can learn this or how we can help your business. There's also a complimentary section there. You can find that in the menu. There's a downloadable ebook, but no email or name required. You can just right click and download and it's yours. So it's a true gift. There's also an email challenge where you can get a little lesson every day. And we're working on something right now, which we're hoping to be sort of finished when Marcia airs this. We have a new sort of course, and you can get about 4 or 5 weeks access to this and get a weekly lesson and access to a Q&A call with me. So you can actually ask some questions. Other than that, if that's a little bit too much for you, I've got my own podcast, Ethical Persuasion Unlocked. And yeah, the first 15 or so episodes, normally the first episodes on podcasts are not so great, but I'm
Like
not
mine.
teaching you, but I'm sharing a lot, right?
Mm.
And so, yeah, start at episode 1 and work your way forward. You'll, if you loved what you heard here today, you'll love all those. But please realize that you need to develop application skill and confidence, and that rarely comes from a book. It rarely comes from a podcast. You're gonna need some formal assistance. And, if I can help you as an individual or your business or your team as a group, I'd be absolutely delighted. Reach out to me.
I love it. And it sounds like you've put or available to us, the audience, there are many different learning styles, whether you're a reader, whether you're listening to, whether you're an active, interactive person, you've got all different manners to learn this style. But I think the key that you stressed that was so important is that you have to be able to put logical applications of this practice into your day-to-day and start to feel comfortable with it, because it's like learning a foreign language, but it's not as hard and more beneficial, and something that I think as us consummate learners, it's something that you can put into your everyday life that you can see an ROI on.
It's not difficult. I mean, what we've discussed today was not difficult, was it?
Not at
It's
all.
easy
Not at
to
all.
use,
But
but
difficult like a foreign language would be, right? Us Americans have a hard time learning foreign languages. So
I think it's much easier than that. But the trick is, first of all, you need to know what it is you're trying to persuade, which is actually the hardest step. And then secondly, you need that habit of looking for it. You're writing an email, and then we need to pause. Okay, what am I actually putting in here to help them decide?
right.
That's the habit you got to get into, and that's probably the hardest part.
So good. Such good stuff. Patrick, thank you. Hey, listeners, I hope you're walking away with these practical ideas that you can put into your business that will help you be a more profitable and value business. And because you tuned in today, you got just a taste of that, and now it's time to lean forward. And so that's what I'm excited about. Okay, and before you go, maybe you want to have a clearer path on revenue and stronger profits? Then go grab your free Profit Booster Growth Map. It'll show you quick ways to find top opportunities to grow revenue and to stop your profit leaks that may be holding your business back. You can go get it anytime at profitbooster.biz, B-I-Z. And if this episode gave you value, be sure to subscribe and share it with other business owners who might need to hear it. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week with more strategies to help you grow smarter and stronger profit. So until then, make your plans and profit with them. Thank you so much, Patrick. This was really valuable.